Speaking of USC, they play a game on Friday night at home against Northwestern, who is at least a little bit better than we thought they would be before the season. Now, when they brought in Preston Stone in the offseason, I did wonder if that was going to lead to some level of success. Turns out it has. I didn't talk about Northwestern a bunch in the offseason on the show. You know why? Because at a place like that, in the modern age of college football, it's a little bit like Stanford, which is now in the ACC for some reason. Neither of these places are Notre Dame, even though I'm sure they'd love to be at some level one day. They are not there. They are elite academic institutions, and they are not committed to football the same way everybody else is. Still, David Braun, one-time Big Ten Coach of the Year a couple of seasons ago, is a good football coach. Former defense coordinator at North Dakota State. That side of the ball, very well coached. I've seen that all season when I watched them play Oregon earlier this year. The Ducks won the game comfortably because they just have a lot more talent. But Northwestern, they are fast and they are physical on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe more physical than fast, but I think they have enough speed on that side of the ball. Here's the thing. They're underdogs of just over 2 touchdowns, according to our friends at FanDuel at USC on Friday night. We have seen bigger point spread underdogs win a game outright this year. Whether you're talking about Northwestern going across to Penn State and winning on the road, UCLA also beating Penn State. All right, that's just against Penn State. But this isn't out of the realm of possibility if USC doesn't bring, I don't know if they need their A game, but they need their B- game. If USC shows up with a C-, D+ effort, yeah, Northwestern could get you. They absolutely could. So the teams that have beaten USC this year, Illinois by 3 points, that game was on the road. And, of course, Notre Dame, another matchup that was on the road. And USC's run defense, much improved this year from a season ago. They still have a ways to go. That is, indeed, I have said this a lot in the last week here on this show. That is the most important element of this game. Northwestern runs for 188 yards per game as a team. And when you are going into this game, David Braun, as I said, good football coach. You ever hear the word game plan get thrown around? And it's kind of one of those buzzwords that people just talk about or they just mention, they just say. Do you ever actually think about what game plan means when coaches say, yeah, I liked our plan? Or, I didn't like our plan in that game. I didn't think our plan was very good. Okay, the big picture game plan for a football game, week to week, doesn't always change for a football coach. It often doesn't, because they usually have a philosophy, a way in which they want their team to play, how they want their game to look. When David Braun goes into this game, I can almost guarantee you he will approach it the way he approached the Oregon game, the Penn State game, when he's going into it with the second most talented team on the field. He is not a fool. He knows that's the case. He's not going to try and throw the ball 30 to 40 times. Preston Stone this year has had his moments, but Preston Stone has also thrown 9 interceptions and is under 200 yards passing per game. That needs to be a complementary component, but for Northwestern, I think you are going to see them come out with a very distinct game plan on the offensive side of the ball, and that is to kill the clock and let your offense help your defense. That's what Northwestern has to do in this game. If they're going to at least keep it close or pull what would be a pretty shocking upset in my view, but not unprecedented, they are going to have to be able to run the ball, kill the clock. I think you'll see them early in the game wind down the play clock as much as they possibly can. They want to snap the ball even in the first quarter. You typically think of this as something that could happen in the third or mostly in the fourth quarter when you're trying to run clock down. You are going to see Northwestern, I believe in this game, run the play clock to 10 seconds or lower every chance they get. Because they know they can't get into a track meet. They want as few plays run between both offenses as possible. That's their formula for success. Run the ball, kill the clock, limit the possessions, and keep the point total. I think it's got to be under 60. If Northwestern is winning, if one team gets to 30, it's not going to be Northwestern, because I do think USC's defense is solid and could easily force a turnover or two in this game. If the total number of points scored, let me pull up the point total according to our friends at FanDuel. If that starts to creep up and up, the total is 50.5. If that goes over, then USC's winning the game. They're doing so comfortably. They're favored by 14.5 points. I don't know if they cover that number because I think Northwestern can execute this plan, but it'll come down to how well they can run the ball. Another key for USC in this spot, and I'm not yet making my score pick. I do believe USC will win the game and ultimately be fine, but they've got to get off the field on third down because what I just talked about comes down to third down execution. If the Wildcats want to use as much clock as possible, I don't think against this Trojans defense, Northwestern is going to be in a lot of 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. I think they're going to have plenty of 2nd and 6 and 2nd and 7, but then a short run gives you 3rd and medium or short, or an incomplete pass gives you 3rd and medium or long. Those are the plays that Northwestern has to be able to string together to sustain drives. So I think USC will be just fine, but this is a really fascinating matchup because USC's offense, I think, can score in the Northwestern defense, which is good, but USC's offense also quite good, and USC is at home. We've seen USC struggle on one side of the ball. It was offense in Nebraska, defense at Illinois, defense and a little bit of offense situationally, mostly at Notre Dame earlier this year. That was all on the road. At home, they've been a pretty good team. I think this could look and feel like a lower scoring version of USC's win over Michigan State. I believe the final score in that one was 45-31. And I also believe that was a 14.5 point spread, and Michigan State covered late with a backdoor cover. So that's a quick outlook at that game. I don't think there's a major upset alert there. Here's one I wonder about. Alabama is off a bye playing LSU, which of course now has an interim head coach, seeing as their former head coach didn't get the job done. This is the week, as I talked about yesterday on the show, of interim head coaches to try and make some noise. DJ Durkin at Auburn. Can they go to Vanderbilt and win? I think they absolutely could. Because Auburn is not an untalented team. Auburn just wasn't properly coached. So now you get a different coach in there. Well, that same logic can easily apply to LSU. When you get a different head coach in there, when you remove the offensive coordinator, who was clearly an issue given the talent of this LSU offense and how they performed this year, they couldn't run the ball successfully. They just weren't very productive overall. Does that change with the interim head coach? We saw this with UCLA. Tim Skipper might be the next head coach of UCLA. He might not. But since he took over, they're a much different football team. Even though they have a backup quarterback, it's still crazy to think that UCLA is favored against Nebraska. Because Nebraska is a much better team that had much higher hopes coming into this year. But why is UCLA favored? Because things have changed once there was an interim head coach. Even if he knows I'm not long for the road, sometimes those things can get weird. Alabama's run defense hasn't been great this year. LSU's rushing offense has been worse. So if the Tigers can figure that out and support Garrett Nussmeier a little, I'd be far less surprised at LSU upsetting Alabama than I would Northwestern upsetting USC. And FanDuel agrees with my thinking, by the way, because USC's favored by 14.5, Alabama's favored by 9.5 going into this spot. But for a team that's playing an unranked opponent with an interim head coach, under 10 points, kind of a small number, especially at home, don't you think? Doesn't that seem just a little bit curious? The total in the game's 49.5. 49.5, that is a reflection of what kind of exists with Auburn. It's not a lack of talent, it's a lack of coaching. What happens when you change the coaching? We don't know. We don't know. But we are certainly going to find out. So I think those games against interim head coaches in the SEC are really interesting. And just keep an eye. They might both win. I'd be willing to bet that at least one of Auburn or LSU make things really uncomfortable for teams that have eyes on the college football playoff. Vanderbilt needs a win more than Alabama for their playoff hopes, but Bama certainly doesn't want to throw a wrench into their plans and introduce a second loss, because remember they lost to Florida State. Yes, this is that same college football season. Boy, we've gotten here in the blink of an eye, haven't we? So keep an eye on those things. I'm not extremely worried about either. I'd be more concerned about Alabama than I would USC.